Welcome to the Futurebuild Podcast, where we spotlight the drivers of positive impact in the built environment. I'm your host, Martin Hurn, Futurebuild Event Director, and today we have the pleasure of hosting Andrew Geldard, Chief Communication Officer at Willmott Dixon. And he has over 20 years of experience. He oversees all the internal and external communications of Willmott Dixon. Before then, he worked for Lang and Skanska, getting involved in some of the biggest projects of the time, from HS1 and large PFI projects like the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital to the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. His expertise spans engagement, stakeholder management, competitor analysis, and thought leadership. And he's also authored significant reports to drive the social mobility in communities such as transformational change and transforming communities, highlighting his passion for how business can build and transform communities. In this episode, we'll explore Andrew's insights on the role of business in the community, the impact of the new Labour government on construction, and the future of building sustainable practices. So, welcome, Andrew.
Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Brilliant. Before we delve into sort of Willmott Dixon and the many things that we're going to talk about, I'd love to just sort of ask what drew you to the construction industry.
Well, it's interesting because what drew me was an advert in The Guardian in the late 90s. And I was working in London for an agency, PR agency. And often on a Monday or Tuesday night, so you'd get back in the train and you'd go back to home and you'd flick through The Guardian to see what's happening. And the Guardian job section, that is. And I looked through it. And actually, there was a job for John Lang, PLC. And of course, John Lang was a fantastic name then in construction, and they were based up the road from me. So I lived in St Albans, they were based in Hampton. So that sort of fitted okay. And in fact, they were a big brand, and they're looking for a press officer. So straight away, it piqued my interest. I thought, actually, that's something I quite fancy doing. So there you are. I was on a train heading up to St Albans. I saw the advert. So I thought, right, I'll drop my CV in, and the rest is history. And obviously, I did, and went through a couple of rounds of interviews. And opened up a whole new world to me in terms of the wonderful art of construction.
And how has it changed over those 20 years, especially from your Chief Communication Officer, Willmott Dixon? I imagine the style of messaging, the community engagement you have to do now, there's really been massive changes in that time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I first joined, there was a lot of problems around the press. So we had a very print media, which was always on about things. So my first and foremost priority then at Lang was dealing with the press, and we had lots of big juicy things to deal with. We had the Millennium Stadium, which was kicking off just as I was there, and obviously we had will it be ready in time? Will it ready in time for the World Cup? It's going to be over budget. It's going to be late. All that sort of thing. So we had all sorts of things going on there. We were doing some pretty big infrastructure projects, some big PFI jobs. So I was quite fortunate because working for Lang, it gave you almost like the eye of the storm of what's happening in construction, and there's some really big exposure to projects. Went to Manila and Hong Kong and saw some fantastic projects happening over there too. So I managed to pack a lot in a very short space of time, and it was really interesting. I also joined Lang just at the very moment, the whole company was about to go into a precipice. And I went from joining John Lang, which is a blue chip, the bellwether of construction, being John Lang on the verge of being bought by Lane O'Rourke, and at the time, obviously Ray O'Rourke, and that was a hell of an experience to watch that. Always watch the company implode in front of you. I'm not saying that coincided with me joining; that was just a coincidence. But just to see that was really interesting, and you felt almost like part of history in a way, because you see the business, what's happening, and really what happened with Lang set in train a series of things which I think happened a lot over the next 20 years with big companies and becoming a little bit too big, becoming a little bit too amorphous, and not really keeping a core, close focus on what they did and what they are and who they are, and losing focus, losing control. And so what playing out Lang over 20 or so, 25 years ago, when perhaps some bad judgments or some errors, some wholly inappropriate allocation of risk, all that sort of thing on PFI and other areas, civils work within the Millennium Stadium, ended up being costly and meant they had to sell construction business to Ray O'Rourke and to sell parts of the business to different companies. That's pretty much replicated elsewhere. I mean, you had situations with McAlpine, Alpha McAlpine, and obviously with Carillion, and also some other big companies who came close to, but fortunately didn't go that way, and have come back strong now. So it was a really interesting time, and it's almost like my big message to anyone working for major contractors is that all the lessons of history are there, so don't make the same mistakes again, because you don't need to.
Yeah. And you've run out many recessions in that time, and house building obviously going up and down, along with that. Some of the lessons along the way.
Yeah, I think first of all, everyone could be resilient and to prepare for it. So you know that the economy will always work in cycles. So plan for it. Don't always expect that things are going to be great forever. Also, look at your cost base. Make sure that is your cost base something which is sustainable. Are you increasing, and are you increasing for the right reasons because you're growing, or are you increasing because you're losing sight of where you want to be? So recessions are going to come and go. We've obviously had a mini recession just recently. We've had the big recession of 13, 14 years ago. We'll have another recession. It's cyclical. You can plan for it. Be robust. Have cash in the bank, and just don't lose your hat or lose your cool, because if you've got the right planning in place, you'll see through a recession and you'll emerge stronger for it. But clearly, don't be consumed by hubris.
Mm-hmm. And we're in a massive time of change at the moment. New Labour government coming in. King's speech today. Lots of positive news about planning reforms, house building back firmly on the agenda with a commitment to deliver 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. What's your view on that? What's your take at the moment from one of the major house builders and contractors in that space?
Yeah, I mean, look, traditionally we've always, as an industry, construction have always done well with Labour. Both the Conservative and Labour require construction to deliver for them. Their manifesto requirements, particularly the current government's new manifesto requirements, require construction to be in the box seat in terms of they've made big commitments around infrastructure, around new housing. They need a healthy industry to deliver that.
Yeah.
I think that at the moment there's lots of positive news coming out. They're clearly, the new minister's engaging with the right people. They want to hit the ground running. They know that for their term to succeed, they need to deliver on their manifesto requirements, and construction is key for that. So I think at the moment it's positive. There will be storms ahead. There will be challenges and troubles ahead. And I'm sure we can go on that a bit later on. But at the moment, I think the industry is in a better place than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But the government themselves need to also be mindful of what they can put the industry through, because we've seen, perhaps with the previous governments, because the industry itself isn't always able to articulate as well as it should do what are the key pressures and the key areas it needs to consult on. And because also the government traditionally have had a very sort of, with the construction minister being buried within the business team, and a housing minister changing every 2 or 3 months, it seems, there's been a lack of cohesion there. And I think that's had a real impact on construction in terms of what's right for the industry, what the industry needs. And the industry needs a lot of things in terms of skills. It needs support around people retention. It needs a stable economy. It needs good quality customers out there that give them solid pipelines of work. It needs an ability to research, develop, come up with new innovation. We haven't quite been able to solve the dilemma of modern methods of construction. It continues to be, a silver bullet that we're ready to arrive. It hasn't been arisen yet. So therefore, we have to think, well, how can the industry go forward over the next 5 years with the Labour government to be successful for the Labour government?
I agree with you. From my chats in the industry, they're very much mobilised and are talking to the right groups and they're saying the right things. I mean, on the flip side, there's been probably a lack of detail towards policies at the moment, and not clarity on the details of how it's going to be delivered.
Yeah, I think that will come. Obviously, we're at very early doors yet, and some of that clarity will come. Now, obviously, we've had the Labour government quite clearly state that it wants to build 1.5 million homes over the next 4 or 5 years. That's a big ask, actually. I think that's going to be tough to deliver. I know it sounds a good headline, but I'm not sure quite if the industry is in a shape to do that. We've also been through a tough period. There's been many insolvencies. Capacity is down a little bit. So I think that could be a stretch, but I think that there's nothing wrong in setting big, hairy targets because that gives everyone focus to go at. But I think once you start getting into the detail, there's also going to be a lot to do around planning, making projects easier to get off the ground. And, there's been a lot of projects that have been stymied or mothballed because of vociferous local opposition. So that restricts investment. I suppose one example of many, but one example would be, was it in Las Vegas had the Globe, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they wanted to bring the Globe to East London. Now, it would have been quite an interesting project but clearly, people thought otherwise, so it was cancelled. Now, I guess fair enough. There was valid reasons for that, and I'm not being critical of anyone, but that sends a message, doesn't it? If you've got money to invest, and you're seeing others who have similar money to invest, but they're not investing it because their projects aren't being welcome, then you take your money elsewhere. So that's an interesting area. There's also another interesting area which I don't think people much touched on before, but one of the Building Safety Act, which came into action in the last government, which has also been developed and enacted because of the Grenfell disaster and tragedy. But one of the things was it introduced retrospective legislation, right? Which basically meant that previously buildings that had been approved and signed off by building control and being compliant were then being retrospectively rechecked and were no longer compliant and had to be changed because of the cladding, and which I can see that. But the message that sends to a lot of international investors is that, do you invest in a country that does retrospective legislation? And a lot of them say, actually, that's a lot of risk here. So whether they're looking for certainty and assurance, and whether they're looking to have confidence that their investments are going to be good, that they're looking at a country which actually, in their own mind, could potentially still be doing retrospective legislation, which could impact their own investments. And I know, we'll speak to a lot of industry people, development directors, chief execs, that is holding back, or has held back a lot of international investment. So it has to be the market. So there are factors that I think Labour will need to deal with that are perhaps a little bit below the current one.
One thing we're hearing about is obviously relaxing the planning rules, and in particular, taking some of the power away from the community and objections around that. But that's going to make your job, something you're very passionate about, is that community engagement, something that we've always done. That's going to make you have to work a lot harder, isn't it, on that?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that previously, Harrogate was a good example where I think it was Lendlease wanted to do a big regeneration. It got knocked back because the local community said, well, it's gentrification, not regeneration, and you wanted to change or be the face of the community. So that again sends quite a strong message out that it's a lot tougher than people think to get development through because of the voice, the vociferous voice of a local community. So hopefully, if there are changes in the planning, it becomes that people start to look at with a more about, well, what are the economic and communal benefits that it brings, if you can articulate that better, and if you can make the planning process a little bit more simple and more straightforward, rather than this truncated long process which takes a long time and sucks up cash. I think that if we can just simplify things, move things forward, clearly it's important the local community do have a voice, and we want to make sure that all the development is in character and keeping is going to make the community better for what they need. But at the moment, the current system is too slow. It's stopping development, and the current system as is will not deliver labour. It's 1.5 million homes a year. So not a year, during the term. So obviously there is change, but it's change that's going to take a while.
It feels, they talk about growth, and it feels like we need growth in the construction industry. It's well written about that 2023 was an extremely difficult year. Most major contractors posting losses. Solvency's up almost 7%. I think I read almost 13.8% of those for construction companies. So really hard challenges. How Willmott Dixon been sort of navigating through that, managing that risk?
Yeah, well, we've not been immune, unfortunately. You're right. There's been about 4,000 companies going solvent. A lot of those companies are small companies, but they all play a key role in the supply chain. And then obviously it has been some more high-profile companies too. And it has a bit of a contagion effect, because obviously when companies are going bust, it means banks are less likely to want to lend or offer credit, trade credit particularly. So it becomes, the banking sector becomes a lot tougher for construction companies to operate in. So it's not just about when one company goes bust, particularly a high profile company, or goes to administration, it does have a big ripple effect to the whole industry per se. So what I would say is the industry now, in 2024, is in a better place. Obviously, we've got through the post-COVID shock around inflation. There clearly is more work in the market. A lot of work that was held up through things like price inflation and viability challenges starting to come through now. And Willmott Dixon is a good example of that, because this year alone, we managed to secure about £700 million worth of work, of orders. Now, this is work that we've been in talks with over the past maybe 18 months, trying to get the work to site, trying to get the project signed off, trying to get the money to a point where it's viable and both parties can build for and achieve what they want to achieve within the budget available. And that takes time. It has taken time, but we've got to a point now where a lot of work is coming through, it is going onto site, and I think you're seeing that across the industry, that the industry is buoyant at the moment in terms of there's a huge demand for construction across all sectors. One of the challenges, I think, for customers at the moment is the industry is taking a slightly different, I think, approach towards risk. So perhaps in the past, where the industry would be a little more gung-ho towards risk and being able to offset risk and perhaps push down the supply chain, I think it's being a bit more cautious, careful, and also mindful of the fact that if you, as a contractor, better to accept too much risk, then a lot of that risk will materialise and you'll end up losing money, you'll end up going bust. There's much better awareness of that. And I think that nowadays, contractors are kicking back and being much more robust in their deliberations with customers, particularly around their allocation of risk, which I think is a good thing, because it's got to be healthy for any contractor to be able to make 4 or 5% on the margin. They have to do that. And that also applies to supply chain. Now, customers, in my mind, should want that to happen too. They should say, look, this is my project. I know you're going to do a fantastic job and you're going to achieve quality and it's going to be a fantastic legacy that many people can use for generations to come. But I also, in the short term, want you as a company to make money, because that's good for people, that's good for the community, that's good for the industry. So I'm hoping that there is that sea change coming with customers. And I know that the Procurement Act that's going to come into being in October this year, I think it's 24th of October, is also going to make quite clear that it's no longer acceptable, particularly for unaccepted customers, to work at the basis that they'll only accept work on the lowest cost basis. There has to be a much more bigger play around output, community support, community wealth, community outputs, that sort of thing, really.
So if that low margin industry makes it really hard to innovate well, or especially when it's coming in, there's a big drive at the moment around net zero building to, whether it's our standards, whether it's using more renewables or reducing our waste, it all comes at a cost as well. And I think we've seen that really you mentioned different industries with off-site sector as well, for the house building, traditional versus the off-site market.
Yeah.
We've seen huge consultancies in site.
Yes, it's a real shame, and we've tried it, and the MMC sector is trying offsite, as you say, and it's just not quite happened for it yet. And that's not through companies prepared to invest, not through the government prepared to invest. I think it's down to pipeline and clearly that it's just been disjointed. There's just not been enough work out there to sustain the volume that LMC related products need, and that's what's holding it back, really. And that's not to say that there are other types of innovation. I mean, clearly you've got a whole raft of different sustainable net zero carbon innovation coming through. Innovation that supports how you measure embodied carbon, how you recycle things, also the products that support companies and organizations being a lot more net zero in their operations. So there are things, and I was at a conference actually just recently, which was fronted up by Bill Gates, and there is a lot of investment, a lot of money for products that are going to change the built environment and how the built environment does things. So I'm quite positive around that. I mean, built environment, as we know, is responsible for about 40% of carbon being emitted. So there's a lot. Now that's existing buildings. That's notwithstanding the new buildings. So whereas there's also a focus around building new so that it achieves net zero in operation, which is great. There's also got to be a focus around what we do with the existing stock as well. And that's something which the industry has and will be looking at. And that's a close collaboration, not just with the industry itself, but with our consultants, our supply chain and our customers around how they do that. Because nowadays I can see a moral shift in when it comes to existing buildings, and perhaps in the past, existing buildings that have reached the end of their life expectancy would be demolished and then they'll build something new instead. And clearly, there's still where that circumstance is right, that still happen. But there's much more a shift now towards how do you look to retain existing parts at the core of that building, and so you retain the embodied carbon and has a much lower carbon footprint. And then we saw that obviously with the M&S, with the legal action that Gove took. And I know that didn't work because Gove was working on presumption to retrofit, and there wasn't a presumption to retrofit planning. So therefore, M&S were absolutely in the right place, and therefore they stood their ground and they won the case. But going forward, I think that changed things, that changed perceptions, that changed people's awareness and mindset. And you're starting to see now a lot more developers looking at, particularly big urban locations, city centre locations, rather than a straight dash to demolish or rebuild. They are looking at retrofit. They are looking at what's the embodied carbon situation of this building, in which case, rather than just demolishing and building something new, can we retain, and you've seen that with some of the planning appeals that have gone through where organisations are bringing things back to the market, saying, actually, we've changed the planning on this now because we want to do this, do that to make sure it's a much more sustainable building.
Yeah. Big thing for us as well is that as an industry is construction waste. Everything else from almost 50% of everything goes to landfill. And I know that you do a lot around reducing waste on site as well.
Yeah. But it's funny because we ran these adverts on the train about 2010, which said, zero waste to landfill. And I remember a senior colleague of mine, he went to the butcher's to buy some meat, and the guy goes, "Oh, so I see Willmott Dixon aiming to have net zero to landfill, zero waste." And he goes, "What? Oh, yes, we are." And of course, it's all going in the imagination. The fact that on these trains, you looked up and you can see, Willmott Dixon, the contractor, this is where you want to be, sort of thing. And, and that was at a time when no one really thought about it, a long time. And but it sort of garnered for us the imagination, and it's sort of what was possible. And we worked hard for about almost 20 years now. How can we achieve that? And we've actually got almost to a point where we are pretty much achieving it. It's not always 100%, but we're in the high 90s. It is possible. There's a raft of new technology coming out that makes it even better. And we're working with one of our customers at the moment to look at things like data, so that every bit of material that's delivered to site, it gets scanned, the data gets fed into the machine, we can match and monitor exactly where that's come from, where it goes next, and we can see almost instantaneously the waste profile, what needs to happen. So there's some really clever things happening in the industry, which is going to make that process much easier. But I think also an awareness perspective that you can't keep pushing things to landfill, and you've got to be more clever and savvy around recycling and around a better reuse of materials and how you do things. Because the industry, and it's been doing this for a while now, so it's very, I think, conscious about it. It can have a big impact in the environment, so it has to do more than perhaps a lot of other industries to address that. And it has made a lot of strides. I think one of the biggest achievements of the industry has been its focus around achieving much development in its own practices. We won a King's Award for Enterprise this year for our sustainable development achievements, and we won actually 3 of the past 10 years that have dealt King's and Queen's Awards that been for sustainable development. So, we are trying what we can do to move the dial, but it's so important because you've got to work your supply chain. You can't do it in isolation. You can't just do it as one company. Big focus now is to work with the supply chain. How do we help there? Because if we're doing this, but the supply chain is stick to their old ways, it doesn't get us anywhere. So the supply chain are keen and determined as well. And we are, and as an industry, we are too. And our customers, most of our customer base, or all of our customer base, are coming around to, yes, what can we do together? And so we are seeing some quite interesting things happening now, but it's still gonna take a bit of time.
You mentioned managing risk quite a lot, and there is a risk with using new innovations. And I suppose, how do you limit that? And I suppose, what do you want to see from the supply chain to sort of aid that as well, really, and make it a little bit more risk-free?
Well, I think close collaboration. I mean, we are doing a lot of work with the supply chain to sort of, I guess, rather than in the old days, we used to just regard them as, this go back when I was first at Lag, we used to put them, in sub-ins, and it was very much that type of matchmaking of the relationship. And I think the industry is so much more better now at seeing the collaboration, and we all refer that with their supply chain partners. They're our partners for growth, our partners for everything we need, and it's that maturity of the relationship is really good, because it means that we can actually have a sit down, grown-up conversation, work together, and we give them access to pipelines, and we give them assurance and confidence that there's work going forward for years in certain areas. What can we do as organisations to harness that, to collaborate and to come up with products which are actually going to be right for us, and how we test them? Obviously, post-Grenfell environment is such that we need to be very careful and what's going to be right for us, what's going to be right for our industry. I think Grenfell has taught us a lot of lessons, and I think that as an industry we have learned a lot, and we are moving forward in a quite a dynamic way to make sure that the lessons of Grenfell and other things are addressed and are tackled. And clearly it's exciting to see. I think this industry is going to be a lot different place in 10 years' time in terms of technology, in terms of new innovation, in terms of new entrants in the market. You've got data, you've got AI. There's all different things coming in that have start making a serious impact on how this industry does what it does.
So your role, obviously, of managing all the communications, and how much that's changed. You mentioned 10 years ago making that statement. I mean, it must be an absolute minefield now with greenwashing or green hushing, and just coming out with some of the statements that you have to make, and back those up with stats. And then you've got very educated people, as we know, within the built environment, that take these issues extremely serious. What's the sort of pitfalls, and sort of how do you get through those? If you were talking to a young marketeer that's sort of trying to navigate those.
Yeah, I think the market, the way you communicate, everything has changed so much. I mean, smartphones. Obviously, when I first started out, no one had a smartphone. You got a brick, didn't you? Which was a phone. That was it, and you typed a number on it and you use it, and that was it. And so the advent of smartphones has been all different ways, huge positive thing and a negative thing. I mean, obviously, it's changed people's behaviours, the consumption of data. All of a sudden, everyone's a journalist. Everyone posts this, they post that. So it's been interesting for me, change in culture. I mean, by and large, one thing I've learned is people now have a low warm threshold, right?
Yeah. Because
they're used to getting everything instantaneously, on your smartphone, off you go, and it's there. So you've got to work much, much harder to attract and retain their interests. And we're really clear about how you do that. So the days of where you write something massive and huge and people will methodically read it, it's over now. You've got to find so many clever, smart, really neat ways to attract and retain people's attention. And that particularly applies also to young people. I mean, we have to attract a whole lot of more young people into the industry to cope with the skills crisis, to the people leading the industry. How are we backfilling? And it's difficult. We're not doing it as much as we should do, but we are making good inroads. And I've seen a huge change in gender parity. Obviously, when I first started out, it was a male majority, and it to some extent still is, but it was particularly a male majority industry then. But now you're seeing such a sea change now in people from all parts of society, but particularly around gender, much more of a balanced workforce. It's still got a long way to go. I mean, Willmott Dixon, we're at 70-30%. So 70% male, 30% women. The ambition for us is to achieve gender parity by 2030. So there's more to go, but we are in the right direction. And we're seeing that elsewhere. We're seeing a lot of good role models now among women. So for me, it's about going back to how you communicate, how do you sell the industry. It's like make sure that you sell it to particularly young people in a way which excites them. They see it as an industry where they can have a good career, make lots of money, and have a rewarding life. And it is that. But as an industry, we're trying hard to move away from some of the stereotypes that in the past has held us back, and I think that that's been particularly the case in the past 5 years. And seeing that the fruits of that now But I think as an industry, sometimes when I first joined, anyway, we were our own worst enemies because we didn't probably weren't awake to the fact that we need to be an industry that reflects the society we're in. Any company or industry that only reflects a small demographic of society is always going to struggle. So as an industry, applies to any industry, but as a construction industry, we need to be at one with our society in terms of that's the cross-portal makeup of our society. We're just a mirror image of that.
Yeah. Your 30% is absolutely fantastic given the background. Well, it's about 12% across construction, women in construction. So, yeah, that's a huge step forward. And to be a parity in just 6 years' time is an amazing ambition. I know you have lots, it's even about percent just your senior management side of it.
Yeah, look, we worked hard for it. These things don't happen overnight, and they do take tough decisions. You have to be able to be comfort zone. You need mad allyship as well. So, we had a raft of initiatives around a women's leadership development program where we've tried to accelerate policy opportunities for women to progress in senior leadership roles, because that's often the way. The higher you go in an organisation, the less sort of diverse perhaps it can be. That's particularly the case as it used to be. It's not maybe as much now, but our focus has been on equalising the diversity across all management levels. So we've done a lot around that. We've done a lot around how we promote diverse, inclusive workplace. We've got behind a lot of different campaigns by the publishing houses to support diversity and inclusion in the workplace. We modified a lot of our employment policies to support it too. So it's a process, it's a journey, and it does take time. But one of the biggest things I've seen is the fact that at a young sort of stroke trainee graduate level, we are seeing now a much bigger portion of women choosing construction, right? And I think that's the case across the board. And it seems to me that's having a real seismic impact on the industry. And I think that come 10 years or so from now, as an industry, I know you mentioned 12%, we're at 30%. I think you're going to find it's going to be near 60 to 40%. That's my prediction next 10, 15 years. Okay, so we are in a good place, but there's more to be done. We can't take our eye off the ball. And, as an industry, if we want the best people is about fishing in the widest talent pool possible, right? To have the best people. And that's why it's vital that we do that, because if we're only keeping a narrow talent pool of people we're fishing in, we're going to struggle. But if we've got a big, wider pool, we're going to bring so many more people with different perspectives, different talents. It's going to change up what we do. And the good thing about construction is that it's not just always about being on a construction site. There's so many other opportunities and avenues, working offices, design management, working as a lawyer, working in IT, communications. Such a big area, but there's so much opportunity to grow, develop, and achieve your own career ambitions. And as an industry, we're better now at seeing that dream.
I think attracting new talent and changing the perception of construction has probably been on the agenda, probably not only 20 years ago campaign. It doesn't seem we've cracked it, but I personally feel there's a great opportunity now. We're the green economy. We've got Gen Z who are very, very socially and environmentally conscious. We've got an amazing opportunities as an industry now to really pivot and say, can we be part of the solution? We mentioned, with 50% of all carbon emissions, 50% of to landfill, and there's so much good green initiatives and ESG happening in the world. I think that's where we've got to position the industry.
Yeah, I mean, all the research we've done shows that young people particularly want to work with a company which has purpose, vision, and is part of the solution. It's not just about what money they can earn or what car they can drive. It's about, is this company going to be better for the society that I live in? And it's been a really strong indicator for us that that's what counts, right? So as an organisation, we give our people 3 days paid volunteering time. Wow. So they can go off and volunteer and support some community activity or whatever. They can just go and do it. And we encourage all our people to get out there in the community and do things. So 4 out of 5 of our people do things, which is great. And, that means so much to them, and it means so much to us, because for us and for Rick Willmott, he wants Willmott Dixon to be a purpose-driven business, right? And purpose means, what is our purpose? It's to achieve a better societal benefits, better than the society we live in. And getting out there, using our skills, ability to do that is so fundamental. And it's one of the key things you'll see now of the Procurement Act coming through is what is the social value, social purpose of organizations, it's going to be a key driver for new work in the future.
Unbelievable. Did you use your 3 days for?
Yeah, well, I've done volunteering, raising money for charity, but
In cyclists, aren't you?
in science, yeah. So called charities benefit from that. And so that's the thing. It's anyone can choose what they want to do.
It's brilliant. I think what I'm keen to do is to always take a step back slightly as well about just on the sort of the new innovations, and especially around, driving this, this drive to net zero, especially on the projects. You've done a lot on using things like reuse steel. A project there that was almost 20 tons. That's like huge amount of renewables going into your projects now, building as house standards. What do there is, we all agree there is no one quick fix. What are some of the sort of innovations that you're getting quite excited about that you're seeing coming through on the pipeline?
I mean, the stuff that's every day, it's sort of like amazes me. There's a really clever technology I saw, which very quickly it uses smoke and spray to work out where the air gaps are in a building.
Yeah.
And then it uses that particular product then to fill in those air gaps. You can do that in the space of a few hours. So all of a sudden, at an office or a room that leaked air in the space of a few hours, it can seal up all that air for you, and it becomes very airtight. Therefore, you have a very thermally efficient room and an office. So there's so much happening in the market right now. We've got some paint that eats up CO2, which is fantastic. How is that possible? It's possible. It can actually sequester CO2 from out there. So there are some really interesting things. I mean, reuse of existing materials. I mean, that was something which happened following a conversation between a couple of our people involved with that particular project, and we're able to take the steel from an existing, I think it was House of Fraser in Oxford Street, that was being redeveloped, to take the steel and reuse it. Interesting enough, with that steel, because it was made before 1940, there was no certification of how robust it was. So we had to do our own tests and make sure that it was absolutely robust and fit for purpose. But so clearly there are some of those challenges. If you use old steel, it doesn't come with certification. You need to then look at how you make sure it's still fit for purpose. But there are some really interesting things. I think data, it's been driven by embodied carbon. People now are much more aware about embodied carbon. So that's the carbon emitted during the construction process by the materials, in the materials, much more beyond the actual carbon that's generated when a building's in use as well. And that awareness, that sort of really sophisticated approach to embodied carbon is driving a lot of things now. Driving things from a customer perspective, where customers are also are expecting a serious proposition around embodied carbon, to contractors and their skill sets and how they work with their supply chain to make sure that they clearly got a solution to restricting and limiting embodied carbon. And that could include also in concrete. There's concrete coming out now, which has a much less embodied carbon, much less impact on the environment. So there's all different things that are happening now that's going to change our industry and make it a lot more greener place in the next 10 or so years.
Feels like there's still a big education piece, especially at sort of a local authority council level. I read your Decarbonised Today report, and that was just a really nice way of summarising things. That this is a process we have to go through. We have to start with education as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, decarbonisation of existing buildings. It's so important because you've got buildings that are very energy inefficient. They cost a fortune to run, uneconomical. They, of course, lots of carbon. So it's a no-brainer. Now, there are government funds out there that help support that process. And, it's not an overnight process, but where it's done, it reduces energy consumption. It makes the buildings fit for purpose for another 10, 20, 30 years over above their lifespan. And also, from our perspective, it's a natural next step for how do we work with our customers to help them achieve their net zero ambitions, right? And, leisure centres, for example, are real huge emitters of energy and carbon. So they have to tackle how they do that. And same with the NHS and their estate. So there's so much of the government state as well as private states that need to look at what they're doing with their current energy efficiency and what the industry could do really to help support how they marry that up with their own net zero ambitions.
Yeah. Andrew, we could talk more about this, but we wrap up the podcast with a few sort of questions around impact as our new theme for Futurebuild, and positive impact actually the built environment can have. I'd like to ask you a question about, what do you see the most positive impact the Labour government could do going forward with construction?
Okay, so, for me, what the industry needs is a period of calm. Okay, so we've been through COVID, we've been through a turbulent economic period that has seen a lot of insolvencies, and we're now entering hopefully a period of sustained growth where there's a strong pipeline of work out there. People know that to achieve growth, economic prosperity, you need to build, you need to create the infrastructure that's going to facilitate and support that. Now, that's obvious. And I'll say to Labour that if you can give us, as an industry, the focus we perhaps need, so strong construction minister that can take on board and hear and listen to and be able to influence government with some of the needs, wants and requirements. Likewise, housing minister that doesn't change every 5 minutes, give us some continuity like that. That's a big step forward. The industry is perfectly good at innovating and it's resilient, and there's some excellent people who work in this industry that can do fantastic things we've seen. And it's about being able to now just let us get on and do that. And hopefully, that there's so much we can bring to the table with decarbonisation, say, with new schools, new technology that's going to change things. Let's now work together, try and deliver that as an industry, working with the government, and a government that gets what the industry can do. That in the past, there's always been a thing where the government sees contractors and developers as one of the same thing, and that's not the case. Developers are different. Contractors operate off smaller margins, and they have a different business model. And I think that if the government could appreciate that, and having a construction minister, we help a strong construction minister that's able to have a voice table, cabinet table, and that sort of thing, that would help. But I'm optimistic that I think that given that the success of this government is partly down to the success of our industry delivering on what it needs it to deliver for its manifesto promises, once that's pretty appreciated, and once the government gives us the tools to do it, then we'll do it for them. Okay.
Brilliant. I think it's great to have Ed Willmott back in the fold as well, but obviously at the DESNES. You talk there about young leaders. Who do you think's having a really good positive impact on the built environment at the moment, especially around that young leadership? Is there any individuals you could?
Yeah, just working for a contractor, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, or it could be someone. It could be someone like Willmott Dixon. You have leadership development programs. Or just someone across the industry really that's having a real positive impact.
There's someone that used to work for us, but now he's got this channel called the BIM or B1M, the B1M, Fred Mills.
Yeah.
And it's a real, everything that's good about this industry is on this. It's a showcase. And it, for me, exemplifies the vitality of the industry, And then when he presents and he shows, and you can see the energy and the excitement, enthusiasm. Anyone who wants to see what this industry is all about, if you watch that, the B1M, so I think he's done a lot really to take our industry into the next generation, and to tell the story and tell the narrative to people, otherwise wouldn't be listening. So I think he's someone I think's done a good job. I think that there's other influences out there. The next generation will be a much more diverse generation, okay? And that's positive, that's good, but it's also essential. So you've also got already some great examples of women who lead businesses like Kate Downing from Skanska and other big contractors. That's going to become more common, because I just think the future is, as an industry, is one that embraces change, and it's going to be much better for it.
Pretty awesome. My next question was, what was the vision of the future? I think you summed it really nicely there. I'll probably end on just a final question about, what's a book that's having an impact on your life at the moment?
So Pete Apps wrote a book, Where the Bodies Are Buried. That is a must-read for anyone in the industry. It really is. It's been well written. He's done a fantastic job. He really looks in great detail about all the things that our industry needs to be aware of, So as I said to anyone, read that book. It's a hell of a book. And, I think that Pete is one of ours in terms of he works with our housing. He knows his industry well. He's been following, obviously, the Grenfell inquiry. And, I think what he's done there with that book to raise consciousness is incredible. So, yeah, I'll definitely put that as a must read.
Amazing. And I've got one more question for you. Sorry. It's just, what would be your one bit of advice to someone starting out? They're coming into maybe into your communication department, coming into construction, and the last 20 years as well.
I'd say that embrace everything and turn your mind off to nothing. So, every day is an opportunity to grow, develop, to learn things. And make sure that every day you reflect, well, what have you learned? What is happening? Be very self-aware. Be an opportunist, It's find ways and means that you can add value in a way that perhaps aren't always expected of you. Always be looking at developing your contacts, your network. Have good people around you that can support, aid, people you can learn from. You never finish learning in this industry. So always accept that every day there's an opportunity to learn something different and have a clear purpose yourself. Be strong with yourself about what you want to achieve as an individual, where you want to be in 5 years' time, and go for it. Because, this industry rewards and recognizes good people, and we've got many good people. We need many more new good people to join this industry, and the opportunity is there. And if you embrace it, you'll do very well. And 20 years given me access and insight to so many different things. And, I've seen so many things happen. Now, that's the thing about construction. It's so varied. You can see and do so many things that you would not otherwise do. How do you pursue a different career for a company working in an industry? So this industry, it's the opportunity of a lifetime, and for you to have a career of a lifetime.
Brilliant. That's really inspiring. And thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been great fun.
Brilliant.